This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
So we've covered these 2 senses so far. What would be the third one that we're talking about?
Well, I think the sense of hearing would be clearly the one that hunters would also be interested in. Mm-hmm. The other 2 being taste and touch. We don't know a lot about, but don't know a whole lot about either one of those, and they're certainly not all that important from a hunting perspective. But
right.
hearing would be
definitely.
And I think if you ask the average hunter, you say, are deer's eyes better or worse than ours? They'd probably hum and haw on that one. They're like, I'm not sure. They may be colorblind. We said they weren't, but they may debate that. If you said, is their nose better or worse than ours? Definitely better. Okay. Yeah. If you said hearing, they'd say definitely better. Most hunters, I think, would say that.
Yes.
Deer have better hearing than humans. That would be the assumption. The research, and it's been done at a number of different places, actually shows, believe it or not, that deer hearing is not much different at all than ours. Very, very similar range of frequencies that we can hear in. There are a few exceptions to that. So I'll give the slight edge to deer, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
One, they have these rotational ears, right? They can rotate their ears, and that allows them to directionalize sound very well. So anybody that's done any rattling, any grunt calling for deer where they've responded, they don't even have to see to know the bush or tree you're in. I mean, they can peg you pretty good if they can directionalize that sound. They can pinpoint it on the landscape. So that's an advantage that we don't have. We have to put our hands up to our ears, and often I'll do that turkey hunting in particular to try to determine if you hear that gobble off in the distance and you're trying to figure out where it's coming from.
Yep.
You cup your ears. So that's a big one. Just the fact that they have large cupped ears. So just the size and shape of them also amplifies sound. They can hear in the slightly higher frequencies than humans. Our range is about 2 to 4 megahertz. Theirs is anywhere from 4 to 6 megahertz, slightly higher. The peak range of grunt calls is in the sweet spot of both humans and deer. Mm-hmm. So all the deer vocalizations and calls, we've tested those. All those fall right in both our peak hearing and theirs.
Okay.
So we're good there. Some hunters have heard about the deer whistles for their cars. The devices you can put on your cars that may be a little bit older than you. But there was a period of time, particularly in the 80s, when fleets of vehicles, police forces, and all kinds of fleet vehicles around the country put on these ultrasonic deer whistles to prevent deer car collisions. Well, research also took a look at those and found that, first of all, about half the calls didn't make any sound at all. They didn't even work. And the good thing is that they supposedly created a frequency that humans couldn't hear, so you didn't know it.
Hey, they didn't know if it was going. So it's like a dog whistle.
You didn't know if yours was working or not. The other thing they found, though, is that the frequency that those that did work emitted was above what deer could even hear. So, long story short, don't put any faith in a deer whistle.
Fully noted. So, I mean, what about I've barely just say, for example, I mean, I've got some quiet camo on, and I'm quiet. Everything is, I'm not making any noise. And then, I mean, just maybe the sleeve of my jacket just barely, you don't notice it, you can't hear it.
So the take home here is very clear. And I'll tell you what I do to actually hone myself. What the ability for what a human can hear mm-hmm. and what a human does hear are two different things. There's so much noise going on in your world that you don't even hear. You tune it out.
Selective hearing.
You hear what you want to hear, and you also know what's normal. If you walk outside in a suburban area, you'll hear cars and people and kids and things. They're just background clatter to you.
Yeah.
None of them raise your. Now, if you hear a gunshot go off in your neighborhood, that's a new sound. If you hear a blood curdling child scream, or anyway, an abnormal sound, you would identify. You'd pick up on and go, "Oh, that's not normal."
True.
Deer live 24/7 in the woods, and everything's after them in their mind, at least.
Yeah.
And so if you had to identify every sound that you hear every day and quickly identify it as friend or foe, you would be amazed at how much better you actually do hear. And all you have to do is, if you have a blind friend, somebody who's visually impaired, and go on a little stroll with them and let them tell you what they're hearing versus what you're hearing, and they'll blow your mind. They don't have any better hearing than you do. Theirs is just highly attuned to their environment.
So you're telling.
So what I do is I find that when I first get in the woods, the first few sits of the year, I'm not hearing good. I'm hearing, but I'm not a predator yet. I'm still kind of just getting there. And so I literally close my eyes for long periods of time and try to identify every single sound and really think about what it is and listen to it. And then as the season progresses, I'm training myself to pick up on these sounds and quickly sort through them in a much better way and be much more ready if that deer backdoors me than I would have been. So I do become better. I don't think I'm getting great by any means, because my hearing itself is going with my age, but I do definitely become a better predator as the season progresses, and hearing is part of that. And that's sort of self-training yourself as the season progresses to work on that as a skill.
Okay. So what I'm gathering from this is when my wife tells me that I have selective hearing and I don't always hear everything she says.
That's pretty well spot on. Now, the other thing is, an important thing here is there are really two major sort of classifications of sound, if you will. There's high frequency and low frequency. Obviously, there's stuff in the middle too, but for general purposes, we'll talk about high and low frequency sounds. Low frequency sounds are these guttural, deep foghorns, train horns. These are low, slow moving in the environment. They're not fast moving sounds. They're slow and powerful. So they go a long way in the environment. That's why we use them on trains and ships, because they will travel forever.
Yeah.
Okay. High frequency sounds are shrill sounds of a whistle, a woman's high pitched voice, an arrow clinking on your metal tree stand. So what you really, they're kind of like the 22 bullet. They come out fast, but die fast.
Yeah.
So if you make a high pitched sound, then, the damage to you as a deer hunter is pretty minimal, because it's going to be gone pretty fast. It doesn't travel very far. Brush, cover knocks down that sound. It's hard to make a guttural sound as a deer hunter. So that's, a low frequency sound is, unless you're bellowing with, bad indigestion, you're probably okay. But the key is unnatural sound.
Yeah.
And so, if you were in your kitchen and you had a tile floor and your wife dropped a quarter, you probably could even identify that it was a quarter, not a penny, hitting on a tile floor. We have become accustomed to certain sounds and our ability to distinguish them based on our history as humans, and hearing those sounds many times over our lifetime. So a deer is going through the woods, branches are falling, squirrels are dropping acorns, the armadillos are scurrying past. They're not batting an eye. Yeah. They've got every one of those patterns and sound profiles down. Nothing walks like a bipedal human, two-legged human. So our cadence, and I know people that often will walk with walking sticks to make four-step sounds to try to mimic more like a deer. I don't know if it works, but it could. The bottom line is human noise, the noises we make, banging on tree stands, whatever it may be, if they're not what a deer would naturally hear, it's a problem.
It is.
So noise itself, you can walk through the woods scuffling the leaves all you want, and that probably doesn't scare a deer. I mean, in bow season, I can't tell you how many times I've quietly sawn limbs off as I climbed up my climbing tree stand in a hardwood, dropping limbs on the ground. within minutes had deer on me. Limbs falling in the woods aren't the problem. Now, if they heard a chainsaw fire up or, me talking on my cell phone, it might have been a different ballgame, but just a limb falling, it makes a hell of a racket. You think, crap, I've scared everything off. Within minutes, I've had deer on me many, many times.
I've actually used cattle quite a bit to get in a blind early in the morning. We'll have fences on our property that we might have them grazing on, a certain section or different coastal field, and I'll have a blind set up right near that fence that it might be a morning that I'm running in and, woke up a little bit too late or, just took too long getting out of the cabin, and I'll shine my light up as I'm walking up and I'll catch cow eyes, and I'm like, I can get to that blind nice and easy. Those cows are right there. They're going to mask my sound.
Well, coming from Texas, I mean, the standard way to drop people off at stands is to drive your pickup truck or your UTV right to the stand and drop them off, because those ranchers and hunters are running their properties with trucks, feeding feeders and stuff. They're used to that that's normal noise. It's human noise, but the same truck, and you don't want to change trucks and go from a diesel to a gas motor on them or something. But if you're using the rancher, same old truck, he's doing his same old routine, I'd much rather have him pull up to the blind and let me slide out quietly and shimmy up than me try to walk in from another direction, because that deer is fully accustomed to that rancher. Now, if that's new noise, if you go to a property like we are in the Southeast and you haven't been on that property for a month, and you get there on Friday and, man, you and your buddies got your UTVs and you get them out and you zip around the property and just run helter-skelter all over the place, checking stuff, that's different. That's sending a signal that, hey, game on. And we've got research to show that kind of focused human intrusion will disrupt the deer's natural movement patterns for up to 3 full days after they leave. It takes 3 full days. And they've looked at kind of the Friday, Saturday, Sunday hunting rush that we see a lot of, the weekend warrior rush.
Yep.
It's not until Wednesday or Thursday of that following week that normal behavior returns to most of those deer.
And that makes so much sense, because we've got, we hunt on we've got all low fence where we are, and we've got a neighboring property that they lease to some gentlemen from Louisiana, and when they're there, because then all of a sudden a back field of ours will just be full of deer, and then you'll see a different set of deer coming. It's like, oh, hunters must be there.
Yeah. So if you're around an area that hunts heavily on the weekends, if you can't get there on the same opening, like Friday afternoon, Saturday morning, then statistically your best day of killing a buck is like Wednesday afternoon or Thursday of that following week. Yep. And you got a statistically greater chance of killing a buck on a Wednesday or a Thursday than you do any other day of the week, if the hunting around you is mostly that clustered weekend, really hammer and function. So if all things are equal, weather's the same, everything else is the same, and you got a chance to, either hunt like a Monday after the weekend rush or a Thursday, go for the Thursday.
Brian, we're going to have a bunch of guys asking off for work Wednesday and Thursdays now, just because of what you said.
Take those midweek days. It's just the data's there to support it.
Yep.
Again, if all weather conditions are the same, if everything else is the same.
Yep.
But keep unnatural noise to a minimum, and I think that's the key.
Absolutely. Well, man, Brian, I love podcasting with you, because every time I learn something new, and I'm already scheming in my head, just learning what I've learned today from you, just like how I can take that and apply it to what I'm going to do this hunting season. So, man, thanks for hopping on the podcast again.
My pleasure. Anytime, buddy.